Hi guys, today I am delighted to introduce you to Marty Fahncke, who I am a great admirer of, and Marty and I met when we were in an acquisitions group together. But one of the things I think everybody's going to find fascinating and interesting is actually Marty's story of how he came to where he is right now. So before I tell you more about Marty, perhaps you could tell us a little bit about your history, your life and where you are at this point in time.
Oh my goodness. Well, I was born at a very early age. Uh, how long do we have? I could tell my whole history and it would take us hours.
Give us the highlights.
All right, I'll give you the highlights. I'll start it with 1986, December 22nd, 1986, which is at 4 p.m. I don't know how many people know the exact moment their career started, but I happen to know that. And I started an after-school job in a call center, and I reported for my first training class at 4 p.m. and began working at a call center, which at that time was among the largest call centers in the world. And their specialty was taking inbound calls for products being sold by television. And I was making $3.35 an hour, which was the federal minimum wage at that time. And that really started it all, because very quickly after a period of time doing that, I learned how to sell things on the phone. And I started looking around, and one day I was calculating that I had sold $10,000 worth of product in an hour. And I looked at I just kind of kept a tally on a piece of paper, and I'm just, because I'm a curious type of person. I'm just naturally like that. So I said, well, hang on a second. I just sold $10,000 worth of products. I made $3.35 doing that. There's a lot of money between point A and point B, and I wonder where that money is. And so I began exploring and looking for opportunities to get in to become a marketer, because I realized that the marketing companies and the people that owned the products and that were marketing the products were the ones that were making the lion's share of the money. And so through a whole lot of things that happened over the next many years, it's been an incredible journey, and it's given me an opportunity. I went from the call center side to the marketing side, to the agency side, and back to the marketing side, and everything in between. So I learned I really learned the inner workings of how to take a product or service and create it from thin air, use direct marketing strategies to deliver a message to a consumer, educate the consumer about a need, educate them why your product fills that need, and then get them to take out their wallet, take out their credit card, pick up the phone and order it. And that's a discipline that it's nothing that you could learn in university. It's nothing really that they teach you anywhere, but it's an incredibly profitable discipline. And this was all, of course, very much pre-internet. And when the internet came around, I recognized very quickly that the skill sets and processes were exactly the same. You're still reaching an audience. You're still educating them about a problem, demonstrating why your product is the solution to that problem, and asking them to take their credit card out and order the product and have it delivered to their home. And so e-commerce was an absolute natural transition for me from the call center and television environment. And then these many years later, one of my specialties is the integration of those new technologies with some of those older technologies. And we can talk about that a little more down the road. But I can draw a direct line to what I do today with what I learned how to do on December 22nd, 1986, which is convince a customer that the product that they are calling about is the right product for them, and get that credit card out of their wallet and make a transaction. And really, it's not any more complicated than that.
How old were you then, Marty?
I was a teenager.
Do you believe then that are salespeople made or are they born? Can you make somebody a great salesperson? I mean, obviously you learned a lot from that experience, but is it because you were a natural salesperson, or can you teach somebody to do what you learned?
I think a good salesperson can be made. I think a great salesperson is born. I've trained and taught many people how to sell, but if you don't have the passion for it, it's very difficult to really be great at it. And it's very interesting, by the way, Mark, I want to point out the word you just used. You just said salesperson, and you essentially called me a salesperson, which many people find offensive. You could take 100 people and line them up and say, let me rephrase that. You could take 100 people who are in marketing and call them a salesperson, and probably 96 of them would be like, I'm not a salesperson, I'm in marketing. But really, nothing happens until the sell is made. Isn't that right?
Absolutely. And that's one of the things where I think people, one of the questions that I was going to ask you is, regardless of what you do in life, if you're going to be successful, aren't we all salespeople? You
Absolutely.
can call it what you want. You can call it show business. You can call it whatever it is. But essentially, the most successful people, I think of Colin McGregor, he's a salesman. That's how you know who he is. But yes, I think that people do get offended by the word salespeople sometimes. And I think also people, for whatever reason, get a little bit offended when you try and sell them. So you talk to a salesperson, and all they do is try and sell people all day long. And as soon as you try and sell your product or your service, it's like, no, don't. It's like, leave me alone.
Yeah.
It's like,
salespeople are the worst people to try and sell something to, aren't they?
So maybe you can tell us what happened after that, because you have sold, and the number is so staggering, but over $1 billion worth of products and services. Is that right?
That's absolutely right. And it's probably at this point, that's a fairly old statistic. So it's probably closer to $1.5 billion at this point. And that is my hands involved in direct consumer purchases. I mean, that's a lot of credit card transactions.
Now, if you sell $1.5 billion of anything, it doesn't matter where it is. You can't do that by yourself.
No, absolutely.
So I guess so you need a team.
Absolutely.
So maybe you could explain to us some of those products and the team around it, or maybe your biggest success, or the thing that you did the most volume with, or I'm just trying to understand how you get to 1.5 billion in sales.
Well, I can talk about a couple of the bigger successes, and you'll see the numbers add up fairly quickly. So, I'll tell you a story that's a kind of an entrepreneurial's journey and an entrepreneur's journey. And this is not my journey; it's somebody else's journey. But I have his permission to share this story. So back in the 90s, back when the infomercial business was still very strong, and of course that was my space. There used to be this trade show. It was a sporting goods trade show called Super Show. It took place in Las Vegas every year. It was a huge trade show. It was one of the largest trade shows on the planet at that time. So like 100,000 attendees, and everybody involved in sporting goods, fitness, exercise, you name it, was all there from around the world. And there was a gentleman there who had this prototype PVC and duct tape device, and he would haul it around to all these different booths and marketing agencies and manufacturers, and try and get somebody to please take this product and license it and manufacture it and bring it to the market. And everybody was like, oh, no. And then I'd see him the next year. And the next year he had upgraded from PVC and duct tape to, I don't know, maybe nicer PVC and duct tape. And I saw him for 3 years in a row. And on the third year, he closed a deal with what at that time was one of the premier companies in the world to bring product to market. And it was a company that had previously done several $100 million in fitness products. And that company was owned by a friend of mine. And so the owner of the product, his name's John. I'll save his last name until later, but his first name was John. So John did a deal, and he did a deal with my friend Eric. They created an infomercial. They spent $1 million on the infomercial. They spent $1 million on final designs, engineering, and actually manufacturing the product. So now they're into this $2 million, and they put it on television, and guess what happened? It bombed. It failed miserably. Okay.
Yeah.
So a $2 million investment from the marketing agency out the window. So now the next year, John's back at the Super Show, but now he has a finished product and he's hauling it on a little dolly and bringing it to companies saying, please market my product. Please market my product. And they're all going, look, the smartest guy in our business couldn't make this work. Absolutely couldn't make it work. We're not going to touch this thing. And so everybody ignored him the next year. He came back again a year later. Now we're 5 years into John's journey, okay? 5 years into the journey, and he comes to the company I was with, and my friend Andy says, I have an idea. And so he looked at the product, and he figured out a way to cut the cost on it really substantially from a marketing standpoint, or from a manufacturing standpoint. And another friend of mine, this is go back to the teamwork. So Andy looked at it, figured out how to cut the costs. Our CEO looked at it and figured out that when they did the original offer, they didn't do a payment plan. They were trying to sell this product for $200 with no payment plan. And he said, well, we need to offer a payment plan because that's what works. And I said, that's a good idea. And then I got involved, and this was very early days of online marketing. And I said, look, I think we can sell this thing online like crazy. There's a huge marketplace for this product. Now, at that time, nobody was doing e-commerce off of television, by the way. This was 2001.
Yep. So
we tell John we're going to do a deal. So we completely re-engineer and remanufacture his product. We edit the same television commercial, which my buddy Eric just gave us. He's like, if you can go do something with it, you can have it. And we put it on the air, and it got a 700% ROAS the very first airing. That product for the next 5 years was a global massive hit. We eventually brought that into 95 countries, and it did $300 million in sales. Okay. There's 300 million of it. The product was called the Abdoer. The gentleman's name is John Abdo. You can look it up. It's still on the market today. Now it was kind of a fad, and it lasted for 6-7 years and did great. And now it's it's around. You can still buy one, but yeah, it was. And there's a whole lot of stuff that had to happen to put that together. But it was a visionary team of an engineer who looked at the product and said, this is over-engineered. It's too expensive to manufacture. We need to cut the cost. A finance person who looked at it and said, we can do this on a payment plan. Let's sweeten the offer to the consumer. And me as the internet person who said, you know what, if we tie TV and internet together and we put, by the way, this was 4 years before YouTube existed. I said, if we put the video on the internet, people will watch it and they'll buy from it, which happened. And our biggest sales happened on Mondays, which was weird because never before that biggest sales were always on Saturdays and Sundays. Well, the reason the biggest sales were on Mondays was because at that time, only 25% of the United States had broadband internet. And so people were going to work and watching the videos online and then buying from them because watching the video online was so unique and interesting. So anyway.
So do you think then that your ability to spot opportunity is what's made you successful?
Absolutely. I look for opportunity. I look for, and I take those chances. So from the call center side, I was doing that. I said, where's the money? There's gotta be opportunity here. So I got into the product side. From the product side and the agency side, there's several other things that have happened in there, but when the internet came along, you said, the internet is going to change this entire business completely. So I jumped onto that. I was very early in social media. I was one of the first people I ever knew to actually monetize social media. And I mean, I was buying ads on Facebook when they were still 5 cents CPM. So the very moment that became available to do, I was all over it. So Facebook, I was advertising on MySpace. There's people who don't even know what MySpace is nowadays, but I was advertising on MySpace. Search engines, I was advertising on GoTo, which was the precursor to Yahoo, which again, years before Google even existed. So I've always tested every interesting, innovative, new way of doing things, find the ones that work. But I've always married my old school disciplines in with that, so that I'm not just testing, haphazardly. I'm testing with precision and execution, and putting discipline to it, so that we can see what works and what doesn't. But you got to take risks.
Well, that's a good point, because I think that even if you're formulaic and programmatic about how you approach things, there must be, because you see hundreds of opportunities, what makes you decide whether it's a marketing thing or whether it's a merger or an acquisition? What's the X factor that you look for above and beyond, yes, there's an opportunity?
The people involved. That product I was talking about was a great product, but what really did it was the guy, John, who for 7 years schlepped to Las Vegas and kept pushing, and he never gave up. And he showed a dedication and a passion that eventually a guy like that is going to succeed. And so to do a deal with a guy like that that's the reason we did it. We're like, look, if you're not going to go away, clearly there's something we're missing. And so he was a very tenacious, very, great guy who believed in what he was doing. And most of the really big successes I've had, it had less to do with the idea. It had less to do with the product. It had less to do with, first mover advantage. It has to do with the people that you surround yourself with and do business with.
I agree. And what about now? Do you think that your approach, because when you started off, you probably didn't have the resources, has
$3.35 an hour? I had no reason.
Yeah. Or let me rephrase that now. What inspires you now to get up every day and do stuff? I mean, what is, you've had so many different successes over your lifetime, but what makes you get up in the morning to want to do it again? Why not just go and retire?
I love the thrill of coming up with an idea, whether it's a marketing idea, a new product, a new business, whatever, but having an idea, creating something brilliant around that idea, some concept, some marketing strategy, whatever it is, and then executing on that. And then I love the anxiety of waiting to see whether or not it's going to work. And they don't always. Sometimes campaigns fail. Sometimes businesses fail. But when they don't, when they win, oh my gosh, it's so fun. I love the thrill of just, it's like athletes scoring a touchdown, or what do you call it in rugby, Australian football? I don't know. Touchdown, a home run, a goal in soccer, in football, all those things. Like those, for athletes, it's very defined, like, okay, I succeeded and then won the match, right? For me, it's like, I did this campaign, I tried this strategy, I went out on a limb and I executed something that I'd never tried before. And here we are. It's a huge win. We sold millions of dollars worth of product, or we launched a business and sold it off to, had it be acquired, or we acquired a new business, whatever it is. It's just about the adrenaline and the fun. And I love what I do. There's been very, very, very few times in my life where I've been of the sort that's like dreading having to get out of bed in the morning and, I have to go to work. I love what I do. I love talking to people. I love doing deals. I love marketing. I love creating campaigns. I love traveling, meeting new people. I just love it. So I don't know. It's just, I love everything about it.
How do you deal with pressure then? Because if you're going to operate at that level, there must be a degree of pressure. I mean, have you found a coping mechanism or a system to deal with pressure, or you're just naturally okay with pressure?
I tend to thrive on chaos. I probably don't deal with pressure in a healthy way. I just pretend it's not there. So I can't say I'm the healthiest individual as far as that goes. I mean, the pressure's there, right? I mean, when you've got $1 million on the line on a campaign, or you've got several $1 million in an acquisition deal or whatever, I mean, that's very intense pressure. And especially the biggest pressure I feel is when I'm using somebody else's money for something, because I very much treat every penny I spend, whether I'm doing consulting or managing a campaign for somebody else, or whether it's managing an investment or acquisition for somebody else, or being a part of that. Whenever somebody else's money is involved, that's my biggest amount of pressure. If I lose something of my own, that's my own fault. I hate losing money for other people. So the biggest pressure I feel is if I feel like something's going to happen to harm somebody else's financial position, that's a lot of pressure. I don't like necessarily always being in that position. I like when we win, but
Yep.
I don't know. I'm probably not the best person to ask. I will say this, and this kind of ties to my current business model, which is very much designed to, I do most of my business now on the road, outdoors. So my business, I rebranded my consulting after 20 years. I rebranded it as Adventurous Marketing. And so now we do most of our business out having fun. So even if it's negotiating a multi-million-dollar deal, rather than doing it through Zoom or doing it in a cold, stress-induced boardroom, we'll do it while we're whitewater rafting, or we'll do it while we're skiing, or we'll do it while we're kayaking in the Everglades. And so I try to balance a very as much fun as possible into the deals that I do and the businesses that I work with. And that helps a lot, because if I had to be in an office, 12 hours a day, that wouldn't work well. But I like to get out and do lots of fun things with lots of fun people, and that helps balance the pressure and the stress a little bit.
Now that's you individually, and it's very interesting. When I was reading through your website, how you approach that, have you got any indication or that doing business that way is more productive?
Oh,
or
absolutely.
Just because you like it like that?
Oh, no, absolutely. So if you spent time on my website, somewhere in there, there's some studies. I don't know where on what page there, but there's some studies that actually show that being outdoors in nature is scientifically proven to help people be more creative and increases communication. Also, by the way, boosts your immune system, which is not unimportant these days. This whole thing kind of came about by accident many years ago, and I do speaking, paid speaking and training, and I was hired. I think this was 8 or 9 years ago. I was hired by a private company to be a keynote speaker at a CEO summit. So this software company had basically invited the CEOs of their top customers, which are all Fortune 50 companies, to come to their summit. It was a private event. There were only like 8 or 9 CEOs there. It was in Montana, and it was a day of skiing, a really beautiful dinner, a day of snowmobiling, and then an evening meeting and wrap up and keynote. And I was hired to do the keynote. So the people who hired me were very specific about, here's what we want you to do and say and kind of position us. Okay, no problem. They said, well, but we want you to come in for the beginning of the summit and hang out and go skiing with us and, be a part of the dinner. And I'm, okay, I'll hang out with the, CEOs of all these companies that I've, brands that I've known for years. And what was fascinating to me was we spent the first day skiing, and I, riding up the chairlift, was on the chairlift going up with a different person every time. And then I was coming down the slopes with a different person every time. And we were having conversations that would never have taken place sitting around a conference room table.
Right.
Deeper connection, both on the business side and on the personal side. And you're a completely different person when you're sitting outdoors like that and you're enjoying each other's company like that. So we had the first day of skiing, and I was starting to notice this, like, there's some things in my keynote I may want to switch up. That night we had a beautiful outdoor, beautiful fire and cigars and cognac and the whole thing after dinner. And again, just this very incredibly relaxed, beautiful atmosphere in this log lodge, and just really deep, meaningful conversations deep into the night. I spent a good portion of the rest of that night, stayed up very late, rewriting my entire keynote. The next afternoon when I delivered my keynote, it was so personalized and so impactful for the audience that I was delivering it to. I mean, it was unbelievable. And to this day, several of those CEOs have, became clients of mine. And to this day, many of them are friends of mine. And the connection and the communication that took place, because we weren't just sitting in a conference room, was so deep that our productivity level went up substantially. So I realized after that, I'm like, wow, that was different. I haven't had that kind of, and so I slowly kind of started applying that other places. And I'll tell you what, if you've got a team that's having communication problems, or if you've got a team that's not working well together, and our business is getting really bombarded with inquiries right now because so many people are working virtually. They're on Zoom and they're not getting FaceTime, and companies want to get their teams together, but they don't want to be in a conference room somewhere. They don't want to be locked inside. And so, but when you put a team together and they are rappelling off of a 130-foot cliff and they're supporting each other as they're doing that, and you're overcoming fears and you're showing people they really can do these things, or on a smaller scale, literally just sitting around a campfire and just poking the fire with a stick and telling stories, you come out of that transformed as a team, as a collaborative unit, as an executive team. Your decision making, your communication, your empathy, it's just through the roof. And I've done for 20 years, I've done kind of team building and all those sorts of things, and taking it outside has been exponentially has improved things exponentially over doing things inside.
Fantastic. There's a couple of questions I want to ask just before we move on. We spoke about stress when you're on that hunt. What about failure? How do you deal with failure? Badly.
Yeah, no, I mean, look, if you're not failing, you're not trying hard enough, right? That's somebody's quote. I don't know who I just stole that from, but it's a thing. And I totally agree with it. I mean, you have to have failure. You learn from failure more than you learn from success. One of the things, when I used to do a lot of my own hiring, I always asked people, what was your biggest failure? And if they didn't have a really good failure story, they probably weren't going to get hired. I wanted to hear a good fit, because the second question is, what'd you learn from it, right? Yeah. But if somebody came to me and said, well, my biggest failure was, I didn't get a 4.0 grade point, or something kind of just like, really? Then they're still due for their big failure, and I didn't necessarily want it on my watch. So I'm a big fan of failure. I believe that you should fail forward fast, right? I believe you should learn from it. I'm a big fan of doing postmortems on everything you do, the wins and the losses. So everything I do, I like to do the rose, thorns, and bud process afterwards. And so yeah, I've had some huge failures over the years, and you just dust yourself off and move on. Pretty much that.
Then let me ask you, where do you think marketing is at? Over the years, it's progressed. We've had kind of below the line marketing. We had all this print, and then radio, and then eventually TV, and even online. It's had a kind of evolution of the product launch formula, and it's all about video on YouTube and Facebook and Google, and now we're into the time of the challenge. That seems to be where we're headed. You think there is a direction we're headed in, or are you noticing any trends, or what's working for you in marketing right now?
Well, those are two different questions. One is what's coming later and what's working today. So I'll talk about what's coming later. I believe, I mean, we all know that attention spans are getting shorter. You've got things like TikTok and Snapchat, and a lot of things are really designed for very quick. Video obviously is paramount. As I mentioned earlier, I've been a big fan of video marketing since before YouTube even existed. Will continue to be. I think that the humans crave that video. They want to see it, hear it, feel it. But the type of video obviously is evolving rapidly. I'm fascinated. I don't know the answer to what's next after Facebook. As I mentioned, I had begun social media marketing as far back as Friendster, which not very many people know about. Then MySpace, and then MySpace kind of went away, and then Facebook. And what's the next Facebook? And I don't know if there is another Facebook. People keep saying there's got to be another Facebook coming, and every time something comes along, Facebook just buys them. So it's going to be very interesting to see whatever kind of comes after Facebook. I don't know if it's out there yet. There certainly are a lot of options, but as far as full on scale, I mean, Facebook and Instagram together, I mean, still deliver the lion's share of revenue for almost everybody I know. So whatever replaces Facebook as the platform of choice for a significant portion of the population of the entire world is what's next. And I don't know what that is, and I wish I did, because I'd buy lots and lots of stock in it, but so far I don't know that anybody really knows what that is. So the future, obviously, it's very mobile. The COVID situation in 2020 has really brought a lot of things very to an interesting head. Face-to-face meetings are not required anymore. You've got a population in the world that's working from home, who many of them are working from home, and their employers are companies who 9 months ago had an absolutely no remote working policy. You must come to the office and sit in your cubicle. And in that fast, companies around the world have had to change their mind about those policies. And so there's just the shifts right now are seismic, and those who are prepared to take advantage of the trends that come out of those shifts are going to be sitting very pretty. And I'm looking at businesses in all sorts of directions that can leverage, what the world may look like next. And, hopefully some of those will win, and, not too many of them will lose. But, the baby boomer generation is hitting its peak in the next 3 to 5 years. They will peak, and then slowly that generation will decline. But in the meantime, it's still a generation that will have massive population and massive disposable income. And then on some of the younger generations that are growing up with what we're seeing now, and of course the TikToks and things like that, they don't know what a computer even is. They don't use anything with a keyboard. They don't use anything with a mouse. I mean, it's all mobile. It's all very quick, bite-sized, and very experiential, and their communities are 100% online. So it's an interesting world, but I wish I knew the answer. But those are just some thoughts on it. So.
And just before we leave the marketing space and go into M&A, is there any particular niche that you're involved in or excited about right now?
So, yes, I'm focused very heavily right now in the home healthcare space. That's a space. The healthcare space in general is being disrupted in ways that nobody ever expected. Some good and some bad outcomes from everything that's happening right now in the healthcare space. But I'm trying to ride a couple of trends in the healthcare space that are less regulated, and actually bring care to healthcare. Right now, healthcare it's a business, and it's really assembly line driven. And I think there is going to be a much larger demand for concierge kind of care in
Agreed.
Back to the olden days of people wanting the house call and a doctor that actually knows their name, and they're not just a billing code on a clipboard. So that's one space
Actually,
that we're really aggressive into.
Yeah, I actually saw a business plan last year for a hotel hospital where everything was this, that concierge type service for people who can afford it. I think they're headed there. So how did you get from being a marketer, a businessman, to focusing on mergers and acquisitions? Was it a natural progression, or did you intentionally go out?
Yeah, totally by accident. I can point to two things that really happened and on each side of that equation. So the first thing that happened was a couple of friends of mine and I got together. One guy had an idea for a sporting goods product, had no idea how to bring it to market, asked me to come on and help market it. So it was just three of us that we started a 3-person company, started the sporting goods product, and turned out to be very, very successful. We did really well with it. And after only a year and a half in business, we got acquired. And we had a company who was also doing really, really well, had a similar type of product. And they called us up and said, do you guys want to sell your company? And we said, okay. And we made a great amount of money on it. And it was an 18-month deal. We had no idea what we were doing. We didn't plan on selling the business. We just thought we'd make a bunch of money selling this product. But they offered us enough cash that we were excited to get it, and we sold the company and cashed our checks. So my very first really foray into M&A was in selling a business that I was a 1/3 partner in. And a couple of years later, I was doing online marketing for a company that actually the company where we had that $300 million product, that same company. And this was again, early days of search engine marketing. Yahoo was the king at that time. And sales were going really, really well, but there was some channel conflict going on there. I ran all of the online, and we had another division who sold everything retail. So through all of these sporting goods stores, they would sell the product through the sporting goods stores. And we had this one retailer who was everywhere my team went, whether we were doing search engine marketing or whatever else we were doing, they were there, and they were kind of like, we're competing with our own partner to sell the same product. And it was a really kind of a dumb move, because it was, causing channel conflict, and it was confusing for the customer, because you got the same product. Today we see it everywhere, but back then it was kind of new. So I went to my CEO and I said, man, I don't know what to do about this. This channel conflict's driving me crazy. These guys are really good marketers. Everywhere I go, there they are. And they're bidding against me in Yahoo. And so they're driving up my costs, and we need to stop them from doing that. And he said, well, instead of stopping them, he says, you said they're pretty good marketers? I said, yeah. And he goes, well, why don't you go buy them? I said, what do you mean go buy them? He goes, just go buy the company. I'd never thought about that. So I called them up and I said, hey, you know who I am? And they're like, yeah, you probably hate us. And I said, yeah, I do hate you. But I respect you as well, because you guys are really smart marketers, and you're kind of running circles around my team. And I said, have you ever thought about selling your company? And they're like, no, but we're open to it. So long story short, we did a deal and I bought their company. And so that was the first of several acquisitions we did over the next couple of years. And wound up doing about $200 million more in acquisitions over the next 2 to 3 years, varying sizes from 5 million to about 80 million. And that's when I got my appetite whet. And so I wound up really focusing on two things. One was deal flow. So I was out looking for the businesses because this was brand new. Like, we all just made this up as we went along. This was literally the CEO going, I'd kind of be interested in doing acquisitions, and here's a target. So we just did the first one, and it was really quick and easy. So I was identifying the deals, and then I was on the due diligence team. And so we had 2 private planes, and I just flew around the country looking for companies to buy, and it was an absolute ball. And so We were backed by a venture capital firm, and had a lot of money to spend, and it was a great time. And so did that for many years, but we wound up probably growing a little too quickly. And quite frankly, I can tell you the precise moment that things started going south. And this is a lesson for everybody. We were having a dinner. We were having a dinner to celebrate closing a deal. It was a big deal. It might have been I think it was like that $80 million deal. It was a big one. We were having this big dinner, and the entire focus of the dinner was on this private island that the CEO wanted to buy. And he had this beautiful portfolio of the island and pictures and all this kind of stuff. And the whole dinner was about the island that he wanted to buy.
Yeah.
And it hit me at that moment. We haven't talked one bit tonight at this dinner we were having with all the executives about the state of our company, what new products we're going to come out with, what new marketing strategies we're going to come out with. Like it should have been like, and I realized we haven't talked about that in a couple of months. And the focus was on the acquisitions and the deals, and by that time we had gone public through a reverse merger. So the focus was on the price of the stock and everything else. And the eye of our CEO got distracted by shopping for private islands and not continuing to focus on the business, which took all the rest of us kind of off. And so I stepped back and I said, you know what, we're going to be in trouble if we don't focus on what we do best, which is create great products and market them. And they didn't agree with me. And so I resigned, and I said, as much fun as I'm having, I don't believe this is sustainable. And I resigned, and within 6 months, about half a dozen other executives resigned behind me, and eventually that CEO got ousted by somebody else because he had totally taken his eye off the ball.
Let me ask you, I'm going to ask you quite a few questions about that, because I think that's mainly where the audience is, interested in, is the mergers and acquisitions. The reverse merger part was that the venture capitalists that were pushing towards that to raise more money. What was the advantage of going to the market?
Yes, our VC fund had pushed for the reverse merger. They were basically trying to secure some outside quasi-institutional funds, but do it in a way. It wasn't like we needed a level investor that was below VCs and the kind of dilution that they were going to bring to the table, but above your standard accredited investor level. And so by doing the reverse merger in the way we did it, it allowed quite a few people who wanted to put in $1 million here and $1 million there, basically. And so it worked well, because we were growing so fast and having so much fun that we had people knocking at our door to give us money. I mean, they were literally like, please, let me give you a couple $1 million. And there wasn't without a pretty major dilution event, there wasn't a way to make that work, for that our VC fund really liked as well. So they went that direction, and it was interesting. It was interesting to do it that way. I think it was a mistake. I think it was probably a little bit too early.
Well, that's one of the reasons why I asked, because I know the advantages of it, but that marriage between the company that you reverse into and the newly formed company can be problematic.
That wasn't a problem, because it was the company that we did the reverse merger with was essentially, it was one of the acquisitions, and it was a much smaller company, and so the reverse merger itself wasn't the problem. It led to that taking the eye off the ball. Like, all you're doing is focusing on the share price, and you're not focusing on
exactly
products to the customers.
But just to break down, because this is where I think people are going to be very interested in that process of, so we're still talking about sporting goods, right?
No, by this time it's, let's call it sporting goods, health and wellness and sporting, fitness.
Let's call it health, whatever. There's, so you could obviously go out there and find a lot of potential targets, but what makes a good target? So I want to talk about deal flow. How do you get it? And then
Okay.
how do you assess that target? So actual deal flow itself, was it just you hire people, or you did it yourself? You got on the phone and just started talking to people, or how did you build that deal flow?
I started with basically my own outreach and contacting people that I knew and just saying, hey, I'm interested in deals, and what have you got? Now, specifically through the program that you and I were involved in, one of the course directives was, basically take your pipeline and look at everybody you write checks to, everybody who writes checks to you, everybody that you do business with, and create this sphere, and then start there. Yeah. Which I loved, because I've stupidly not been doing that over the years.
Nobody does.
And I'm just like, well, okay. One of the easier deals I ever did was my bookkeeping and accounting firm, which I've had for 10 years. I have multiple accounts with them, and I'm like, why don't I own part of that? So, yeah. One call, hey, this is what I'm doing, and I'm going to bring you more business, and I'm going to make sure all my deals are with you. And they were like, well, yeah, sure. I mean, it was, come on, some of them are so simple, but a lot of it was really me reaching out to, I created that list of, who was on my list and kind of category, and I came up with 274 companies on my very first list.
That's impressive.
So and it was funny, because when I first started, I was like, oh man, I can only think of like 5 companies, and I racked my brain, and then it would just, one day the light bulb went off. It was on a Sunday. I'll never forget. It was on a Sunday, and I was really not thinking about that. I was just kind of, I let my brain rest, and all of a sudden I went, oh, well, there's that. And I write it down, and oh, well, there's that. And by the time I'm done, I get over to my computer and I'm putting them in a spreadsheet, and I ended several hours later with 274 names. I am still not through that 274 names, by the way.
Wow.
I've made it about 150 names in, and I can't keep up with the deals. So a couple of things have happened. Number one is, it is such a buyer's market right now that I'm averaging 30% positive responses on my outreach. So for every 10 companies I'm reaching out to, 3 of them are saying, yeah, I'm interested in selling. I can only have so many conversations in a day. So that's happening. And then the other thing that's happening is, a lot of people I'm talking to are like, no, I'm not interested, but I know so-and-so and so. And some people have referred me up to 5 people that they've like, oh, you need to talk to this guy, or there's this lady, or that person, or whatever. And so I'm getting a lot of inbound referrals from people who are like, hey, you need to call Marty. If you're thinking about it, Marty's the guy to call. So my inbound referrals have really skyrocketed. And those have gone up even more very recently. And then last but not least is, I've partnered with, I've got 2 people I've partnered with, and they're very aggressive, very hungry, probably more on the novice side of things. And so they've basically agreed to kind of go out and find deal flow and bring it, and I will help to make the deals happen, and we'll all share in the success. So, so between all those things, I haven't even cracked 200 on my 274 original names, and I'm as busy as I can be. So.
And have you considered forming a house office, or, I see that there seems to be a progression to people who form a deal team. Once that deal flow gets running, it becomes too much for one person to handle, and then they start to bring in that expertise. Have you formalized that and built a team around yourself?
I have not. I don't know that I want to get that big. I have 2 very specific projects I'm working on. They both have a 3 to 5 year timeline. They have teams around them. So I guess the answer is yes. I just didn't think about it that way. So I've got a couple of partnerships, and they've got, like I said, we have a very specific, this is what we're going to accomplish, when we're going to accomplish it. This is the volume of our acquisitions. This is, so we're, and both of those are really designed to arbitrage the multiple difference between the SMB multiple and a PE multiple, or maybe even VC, but probably at the PE level. So we're really looking to build that out, and then take those entities and have them be acquired by a PE.
Well, that's a good point. I mean, it's because the kind of traditional model is to buy at one multiple and then sell at a higher multiple to a bigger fish. When you're looking at something in health, everybody hammers, EBIT, EBITDA, the cash flow. How closely are you basing your entire decision on a multiple of EBIT, for example, or what's the most important factor, really? I mean, we've spoken about people, but will you buy a company that doesn't really merit it? And let's say it has a $1 million EBIT. Are you going to offer them a 3 times multiple? Or if they're asking for a 6 or 7, what would make you pay more for it?
In the spaces that I'm playing in, I would never pay a 6 or 7. It's just, it's not worth it. If we were in, I mean, there are certainly sectors that may be cheap, but it's not cheap for what I'm doing. So we're really looking at 3 things. So number one, we're looking at ability for EBITDA to cover debt service. Yep. So we are leveraging a good portion of our acquisitions. We've raised capital, but we are leveraging a good portion of it. So the math has to work out that the business as a standalone has to be able to cover its own debt service of the acquisition. So that's number one. Number two is we're looking at opportunities for growth, whether that be because of something that me or my team can do to grow that business, or whether it's growth just because of just the sheer fact of consolidation with our other businesses through strength in numbers. So we're looking for growth opportunities. And then the last thing I mentioned already, which is the people. I do not do business with people I don't like. And so I don't care if somebody handed me the business and just wrote it over to me. If I didn't like them and they were still involved, now if they handed it to me and go away, that's fine. But but even then it would be questionable, because bad people tend to have bad businesses with skeletons in their closets. So, so the people is a big factor. And if you are a good person, I'm willing to pay more, because that means your business is going to be good and your team is going to be good, and the efficiency of working with you will be there. Where if you're a kind of person that's a jackass and you're hard to deal with, and I'm constantly stressed out by you, I don't care how much money there is to be made there. I don't want you around.
I've always struggled with this concept of, I know that there are tables out there that will give you a multiple depending on the industry. Yeah. But I still think that it's hard to get my head around paying a multiple of, let's say it's 10, just because it's labeled that industry. It's got to make sense. It's got to, like you say, it's got to service the debt. Yeah. It might not be your biggest deal, but what was the most fun deal, or the one that you liked to do or had the most fun with?
Well, I mean, that very first one was fun. Somebody calls you and says, "Let me give you eight figures for your 18-year-old business or 18-month-old business." Yeah, that was fun. I had no idea what I was doing. Man, they've all been fun. I can't. Every single one has had something to it that's been. You could ask me, what's been your least fun or biggest struggle? They're all of them. They all have twists and turns. All of them had some point in the deal where, almost all of them had some point in the deal where it wasn't going to happen. It was going to fall apart. Oh no, what are we going to do? We got to get out, we've got to save this. And, you negotiate and you come to agreement, and then there's always more negotiation after the agreement.
There's always a story, isn't there?
There's always a story. So, I mean, deals, I just had one. This one's still stinging me. I've been working on one particular one since April. And, we were there and literally, and this thing is minting money. I mean, minting money. And had LOI, everything, doing due diligence, we're progressing. Money, I'd signed a lease to move the business. I mean, it was there, And literally at the 11th hour, the seller backed out. And that was tough. But I'm glad he backed out then instead of backing out later when he had a when I had laid down my money and he had commitments to follow through on that he probably wouldn't have followed through on. So I'd rather he back out when it didn't hurt me.
I had the same thing yesterday, Marty, and also since April, I've been working on this deal and kind of had a verbal confirmation. And if I think I'm a good judge of character. If I was reading body language and conversations, I would have bet that this deal was down and done. Mm-hmm. And in my head, I'm already got all these plans, like, what we're going to do with it. And I like the people with it. And then I got an email yesterday saying, we've decided not to go forward.
Sorry to hear that. It's tough.
And you just never know, do you? So you think that you do, but you never know until the deal is really done.
Nope.
And is there anybody in this space, because it's a unique space, that you admire, or you could point people to go and learn from, or any books that people should read who want to get into to buying businesses? What advice would you give to somebody who that's what they would like to do, but they don't know where to start?
Well, it's interesting. I haven't read a whole lot of books about mergers and acquisition. I've just done it and learned it by osmosis. Now that I think about it, it's not something I've specifically studied a lot of, other than Roland Frazier. I got to know Roland through Traffic and Conversion, which was a very impactful and profitable conference for me to attend. I always learned something there. I did a lot of networking there. A lot of my business partners were there. So I'd been going to Traffic and Conversion for several years. And Roland Frazier obviously was a co-owner of that, and he had several other businesses. And he really, I really owe him a great deal of gratitude for inspiring me to understand how simple it can be, and giving the tools of making deals happen that some of these deals were so simple. I just was smacking myself in the head that I've not ignored, but I didn't even know they existed. Deals that were under my nose the whole time, and now my eyes have been open to it. And so Roland Frazier's my guy. I mean, he really knows how to do acquisitions. He understands how to do them in a great way, creative ways, and has taught me a great deal. And so yeah, that'd be my answer.
Yeah. It would be mine too. So, a shout out to Roland there. I think that the thing that I admire most about Roland, apart from the fact that I think he's a genius, is that he has got one of the best business minds I've ever seen, but he gives so freely of all of the information that he has.
Yeah.
That it's actually a fire hose of information he gives you.
Yeah.
If you ever do get a chance to work with him. So if anybody's listening and they want to be in this space, just find out what Roland's doing, and, do one of his courses or reach out to him. He's a very approachable person. And I'm going to land this plane soon, but there are a couple of things, two things that as far as mergers and acquisitions go, where you've got the romantic side of it, which is the hunt and the things that interest us, but you've also got how do you get the money and how do you run the thing? So did you find it difficult to raise money for ideas, or do you think that if there's a really good business, the money will be found? Or did you find a problem there?
So the money has not been a problem. There is a shocking amount of capital available out there at the right times, by the way. Real quick, that's a deal I was doing in 2008. We had been on a dog and pony show, hitting VCs. It was a great idea. It was a brilliant idea. Loved it. It was the whole team of us. This was a startup. This wasn't an existing. This is a startup. And we finally had somebody committed to the first $1 million, and we were headquartered on the West Coast in San Jose, California, and this investor was in Miami, Florida. So he said, "Hey, yeah, let's do this deal. And so, fly out here, whatever day it was, and we'll have a nice dinner and write you a check. I'm like, okay. We get on the plane on the West Coast. While we're flying from the East Coast of the United States, California from the West Coast of the United States in California to the East Coast in Florida, Miami, Florida, was the day in 2008 when the economy collapsed. Bear Stearns collapsed and the stock market just completely tanked. And we were on the plane when all this was happening. We land, and the guy personally picked us up, which we thought was weird because he was going to send a car for us, and we were going to meet at the Ritz-Carlton Key Biscayne Hotel. I remember this very distinctly. And he's at the airport, and we're like, why is he at the airport? He picks us up, and he said, I'm picking you up personally because have you heard what's happened today? And we're like, well, we're getting bits and pieces on Twitter. And, of course, that was back before you could use a phone on a plane or anything. So we basically get the news, and he said, bottom line, he says, I'm going to take you to a really nice dinner tonight, but I'm not writing you a check. That business never did take off. It never did happen. And so, but outside of anomalies like that, there's capital available. If the right deal comes along, there is somebody out there who will invest with you or lend to you to make a deal happen. I like doing deals with partners. Most of my deals I've not done alone. I like working with partners who are either financial partners or sweat equity partners or whatever. And so there's money out there. To your first part of your question, which was the integration, that's the tough one. Integrating businesses together can be very tough, as we all know, and it doesn't always work.
They never tell you that.
Yeah, it doesn't. Yeah. I've undone some deals because of that. I've undone some deals that the culture absolutely, we tried and it didn't work. And in order to it's almost like my youngest son is a lifeguard. Okay, he's a certified lifeguard, and in lifeguard training, half of the training is how to save and rescue a drowning person. Mm-hmm. The other half of the training is how not to let that person drown you.
Yep.
It really is. So their strategies, they do everything they can not to get in arm's reach of a drowning person, because they will grab you and wrap themselves around you and sink you and kill you. And so lifeguards are very specifically trained not to let their victim drown them. And integrations can be the same way. If you realize at some point that your core successful, thriving business may get grabbed onto and drowned by the integration, you need to look at it and say, are we going to push through this and overcome this and get it to where this works? Or maybe we undo this deal. And even multi-billion-dollar deals, you'll see big, huge companies that'll sometimes start a merger, and then they'll go, wait a minute, we're going to back off of this. Yeah. It just doesn't fit.
That's the smart ones.
Yeah. Yeah. And the bad ones will continue down the road until the whole thing's completely worthless, and then sell it for pennies on the dollar, which I've seen happen too. So
now I'm just going to give you, so that people can get to know you a bit better, I'm going to put you on the spot and ask you some rapid fire questions.
Okay.
And because it's you, I wanted to go outside the box.
Oh, this is going to be outside.
Are you a hunter or a gatherer?
Oh, I'm a hunter.
Absolutely. You just stepped outside your office. You found a lottery ticket and you win $10 million. What are you going to do with it?
$10 million. What am I going to do with it? I'm going to, I just found it. First, I'm going to quietly see if I can figure out who owns that ticket. If it's on the ground, it's not mine. So I'm going to figure out how I can find the rightful owner without causing a stampede of fraudulent claimants. If I can't find the owner, then I'm going to turn it in, get the money, and I'm going to use that money to rescue failing businesses.
Excellent. Dog or cat?
Dog.
Who inspires you? What inspires you? I mean, if you wake up in the morning, what's your basic philosophy in life?
When I was a teenager, I got to meet somebody who was became a one of my idols, and I had a dream or a vision of being able to share the stage with him someday. I never was able to realize that dream of sharing the stage, but I was able to realize the dream of meeting him and conversing with him on a couple of occasions, and that was a gentleman named Zig Ziglar. And most people know
Yes.
who Zig Ziglar is. He had a saying that when I was 17 years old was imparted to me, and I've tried to live my life and my business that way from the moment I was 17 years old. And it's, you can have everything in life you want if you just help enough other people get what they want.
And I actually, on the website, there's pictures of you with Dan Kennedy and Robert Cialdini and Ecker, and now you're speaking about Zig Ziglar. Of the people that you've met, either those ones I've mentioned or anybody else, who did you think was the most charismatic or really impressed you? You met them and you thought, wow, that's a special person.
I don't know. I've met so many great people in my career. I mean, obviously Zig Ziglar had a huge impact on me. Dan Kennedy melts my brain. I mean, Dan Kennedy, I mean, he was one of the very first, really, the very first marketing information I ever devoured. I mean, I bought some program from him a million years ago, and it was mind-blowingly good, and he completely shaped my brain. Robert Cialdini, he's not charismatic, but his principles of persuasion are I could probably ascribe $500 million in sales to just using that formula. I mean, guys, if you have not read that book, read the book. It'll do everything, whether it's
Great.
writing copy, whether it's negotiating deals, whatever it is. I mean, the principles of persuasion that Cialdini codified are I can't overstate enough how important they are. So I don't know. I love them all. I love people. I love good people.
What's one talent that you have that very few people know about? Do you
Very
play
few
the
people.
guitar, the piano? Do you have a hobby? Then what's one thing that people wouldn't generally know about you?
I have no skills whatsoever. I can't sing. I have no musical skills. I can't dance. I have no artistic ability whatsoever. I love to cook. I love to cook,
There
and
you go.
I love to cook outdoors. I'm a very good outdoor cook. So whether it's Dutch oven, Dutch oven dinners, or I'm actually very famous for a really delicious oatmeal apple pancake that I make on a cast iron griddle over an open fire with homemade syrup. If you ever get a chance to taste it, you will see why it's so wonderful, and it's healthy too. So
You wake up, you go to your computer, you've got 2,000 emails, right? How you decide what you're going to do first?
2,000 emails. I hit delete all and then see which ones float back up to the top, because those are the important ones.
Now, I'm just going to go to your website, and you can let me know when you can see the screen.
I see the screen.
Okay, so one of the fabulous things about this conversation has been that if you haven't got that sense of who Marty is by now, then we both share this passion for mergers and acquisition and helping people. And particularly, I encourage anybody who is interested in business to look at mergers and acquisitions. It's a team sport. There's plenty of room for people. But if you want to reach Marty, and Marty, he does do paid speaking events. I think you do some coaching as well, don't you, Marty?
I do coaching, consulting, paid speaking events. I mean, I just, if your business needs help, call me. I'll figure out. If I can't help you, I know who can. So,
and that's very true. And I can tell you that, what Marty is saying is absolutely true. If he's ever in a position where he can help anybody, he will. And his website, adventuristmarketing.com. Go check her out. You'll get hopefully you got a sense of who he is from this interview, but you'll also learn more about him on the website. And don't be afraid to chat to him. But Marty, I really appreciate the time that you spent with me. Thank you very much for doing that. and it's been great. The information that
It
you've
has been a
shared has been
great interview, and I was
fantastic.
looking at the time. I can't believe how quickly so much time has gone by, and so you're fantastic. Thank you for having me on. I hope I've given some good information that will be helpful to you and your listeners. I always try to educate and motivate. I love, I have a passion for business. I have a passion for people, and I have a passion for helping people be successful. So if anything that I've shared today can help anyone out there be successful, then thank you for letting me get that message out, Mark.
Thank you very much, Marty. Bye, guys.